Just for a moment, imagine a sweet and chunky baby boy all wrapped up in his crib. He is placed there by his mother, and he looks up towards this mother whom he so desperately relies upon for survival and comfort. He smiles as they lock eyes. This smile is an essential social cue that many babies use to keep their caretaker coming back, holding them and singing to them as they shower them with love. But this sweet baby boy's smile quickly evaporates as he realizes he's lying in his crib alone and his mother didn't reciprocate his smile. Instead, she pats him twice on the back, says, there, and walks out of the room, closing the door behind her. Sensing her absence immediately, this baby cries a little louder. A few minutes pass and still nobody comes. So he cries a bit harder and even louder. After 5 minutes of loud crying, his mother comes in, gives him a polite smile, pats him on the back twice again, and says quietly, shh, shh. Then she walks out, closing the door behind her again. At this point, this chunky baby boy starts screaming. Subconsciously, he doesn't understand why his cries are not working to secure the love and attention that he needs. So he gets more and more distressed until 5 more minutes pass, and his mother comes back in, repeating the same actions she did before. Again, he is alone, and his screaming is so loud now that his face is turning blue. His lips are now purple as his tiny little body attempts to physically and emotionally process the stress hormones flooding his body. Remember, this is a baby. He hasn't matured enough yet to regulate his own emotions. He has no way to make sense of any of this other than feeling the visceral emotion of being abandoned. This time, 10 minutes pass, and by the end of that 10 minutes, he's barely breathing. Now it's his father who comes in and says, shh, baby, shh, and also pats him on the back lightly. Very soon, his father is also nowhere to be seen, and the door to this baby boy's room is closed yet again. 20 minutes pass, and then another 20 minutes pass, until a whole hour has gone by. Nobody comes. This beautiful baby boy is still crying hard, and at this point, he is vomiting because he's under so much stress. His mother comes back in again, this time to swiftly wipe the vomit off of her baby. As she slowly lifts him to wipe the vomit off of him, she can hear his cries de-escalating and his breathing slowly, ever so slowly, returning. But that's short-lived, as she then proceeds to pat him on the back once again, saying, shh. And then she walks out of the room again, leaving her baby in his crib. This time, she rolls her eyes at her disgust that her baby is crying until he's blue, just for attention. Meanwhile, alone in his crib, this baby's crying is now strongly tinged with anger, and quickly he starts turning blue again. He doesn't understand why his mother came for a minute and then left once again. He escalates his crying to extreme levels within seconds this time, and still nobody comes. A few more minutes pass, and now it's dead silence. No sign of mum or dad, until eventually he collapses into a deep sleep thanks to the exhaustion that now envelops his tiny body. Mum and dad are relieved. Finally, they can get some much needed rest. Dad has to work tomorrow, and he can't function on 6 broken hours a night. Weeks go by, and Mum notices something very strange. The smile her baby boy often gave her was no longer there. She looked down at her unusually quiet baby, observing the world around him. But she doesn't notice the despondency in his eyes. He's alive, but not fully alive. The trust is gone. Thus, the crying is also gone. He's now in survival mode. What I want you to notice about this story is not just that the baby was neglected, but that he no longer wanted to signal distress. He no longer wanted to seek out help. He no longer believed that anyone would come to his aid, nor that anyone would come and interact with him or play with him. He no longer wanted to be close to anyone, and instead, he is filled with distrust. Not only were his emotional needs ignored, in the end, his emotions were met with contempt. Nobody cared. And that's how he began his life, with an avoidant attachment style. Fast forward a few decades, and this baby becomes a young man who is a functional part of society, at least on the surface. Everything seems to be fine until one day he loses his job and everything starts to come crashing down. He turned to alcohol and drugs because he has no ability to regulate his emotions. His selfish behavior becomes evident as he withdraws from his own wife and his young kids. As they say, it's only under stress that a person's true nature is revealed. In 1998, Mikku Linsa and Florian examined the coping ability of adults under stressful situations and found that an insecure style of attachment was associated with more negative responses to stress, while securely attached adults managed stress more effectively and positively. So, underneath the well-practiced facade, this man had an avoidant attachment style, which meant that he prefers distance over intimacy and withdrawal over caring for others. So here's the big question. Can an avoidant ever truly love you? Well, first things first, we have to distinguish between avoidant behavior and avoidant attachment style. These are two very different things. Unfortunately, as this framework of attachment styles has become more and more popular, what's happened is that, like any other framework that's become popular, is that it's become bastardized. And what that means is now we have people running around calling other people avoidant just because they don't want to date them, or just because they won't return their call, or just because they don't want to commit to them. It reminds me of the days where, back in 2009 and the early 2010s, where emotionally unavailable men was the big hot topic, and emotionally unavailable was the buzzword back then. And almost any man who wouldn't commit to a woman was considered emotionally unavailable. But that's not true. There's a difference between avoidant behavior and avoidant attachment style. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Anyone can exhibit avoidant behavior, even someone who has secure attachment. Someone whose behavior indicates to you that they're avoiding you could simply be a signal that says they are protecting their own resources. So if you're dating a guy who seems to have avoidant behavior, maybe he doesn't respond well when you express your emotional needs to him. Maybe he's umming and ahhing about whether he wants to meet up or not. Or maybe he has kids from a previous marriage and they're pulling him in all sorts of directions. It doesn't mean that he has avoidant attachment style. But let's say this man you're dating is secure. Can he ever truly love you, even if his behavior is avoidant? The answer is yes. He could potentially truly love someone, but perhaps he doesn't love you. Here's another uncomfortable truth. You can't judge someone's attachment style in the early dating stages. Now, I know that there are promises out there that other dating coaches give that you can figure out someone's attachment style on the first date. Look, there may be signs of it on the first date, but the only way that you can truly figure out someone's attachment style is through many attempts at creating intimacy with them and seeing how they respond. If you attempt to get close to someone and create real intimacy with them, and I'm not just talking about sex here, I'm talking about emotional intimacy. If you try to get close to someone and you try to be vulnerable with them or try to inspire them to be vulnerable with you, and they constantly deflect that, then maybe, just maybe, you could consider that they might have an avoidant attachment style. But here's the key. Most people with avoidant attachment have learned behaviors that they exhibit in order to fit in and be functional members of society. This means that every single adult male or female that you meet and date usually has well-practiced external behaviors or superficial ways of engaging with you and making you like them more. This means that every single adult male or female that you meet and date who has avoidant attachment style has learned behaviors to make them come across to you like they are functional and likable. It's called masking. No adult is stupid enough to reveal how vulnerable and fragile they really are deep down inside. Remember, avoidant attachment style essentially comes from never being given enough love, attention, and attachment from your caregivers. What this means is that deep down inside, you feel deeply unworthy of having emotions, of having intimacy, and of having any kind of intimate relationship. Do you think that as an adult, people with avoidant attachment style would easily let that be seen by people? The answer is an obvious no. So every avoidant you ever meet is going to have these defenses, these patterns of behavior that they have learned to be a functional member of society. It takes many attempts over weeks and months at intimacy with someone to reveal them as someone with avoidant attachment style. And let me tell you, women can be married to an avoidant man for years, before they figure out that they're actually married to an avoidant. And that's because it's not always easy to tell. Their learned techniques are just too well practiced. Plus, if you are someone who doesn't have the skills to create intimacy and to go deeper with someone, and if you're not used to being vulnerable with others, if your modus operandi is to be more surface, then you actually become less able to reveal avoidance for who they really are. Then you actually become less able to reveal someone who has avoidant attachment style. So let's be a bit smarter about this. Let's look deeply at what avoidant attachment style, or as I like to call it, avoidant attachment patterns truly are. They're not just avoidant behavior. They're not just being commitment phobic. Even a securely attached person can feel commitment phobia towards committing to a specific person. Avoidant attachment patterns come from extreme, and I really mean extreme, neglect, starting when you were a baby. As I've delved into this idea of attachment patterns over the last many years, what I've learned is that attachment patterns are on a spectrum. So if you have secure here, then you have more anxiously attached people here, and you have those people who are on the other extreme end, truly avoidant people. Of course, you can have people who are anxious avoidant somewhere in between, which is also called disorganized attachment. Those people you can get through to a little bit more easily, but those people who have been so badly neglected as a baby, who have gone to the extreme end of avoidant attachment style, have endured an unimaginable amount of trauma in their life. You could even say that their caretakers have let them down so badly that these avoidants have come into the world with zero emotional resources to be vulnerable in any way. And not just to be vulnerable, but to feel any kind of emotion, to process any kind of emotion. And if they can't even process their own emotions, if they can't even care about themselves enough to feel and to grieve their own emotions, how can they ever care about you? So going back to the spectrum of attachment styles, you have secure here, the anxious people somewhat here, and they're not too far gone. Then you have those people on the extreme end, the avoidantly attached people. What these people have is what John Bowlby called compulsive self-reliance. That is that they have no capacity to trust other human beings or relationships, which means that they don't have the ability to be vulnerable. This doesn't mean that they can't learn to be, but that they don't have the inner resources to allow themselves to be. You know, Sacred Heart University did a wonderful study on the attachment styles. And in that study, they learned that people with avoidant attachment style have a specific template through which they see themselves and others. So what this study found is that securely attached people see themselves positively, but they also see other people positively. So their inner template sees other people positively, which means that they can trust other people when they need to. So they have a healthy self-esteem and a healthy respect for their own emotions and their own intentions in relationships. Anxiously attached people, however, tend to see other people positively and themselves negatively. What this means is that they have a constant need to seek approval. Their nervous system is always in overdrive, trying to seek this sense of certainty and this feeling that other people approve of them. But because they see themselves negatively, they tend to feel incapable of forming positive connections and positive interactions with other people. And then you have those people with disorganized attachment style who see themselves as negatively and they see other people through a negative light. That's very difficult to work with. However, with disorganized attachment, those people can still give you an opening with which to work with them. Because in my experience, when I've worked with clients who have disorganized attachment style, they're still capable of noticing their self-sabotage. However, when we're talking about those people with avoidant attachment style, those people, as Sacred Heart University revealed, see others negatively and themselves positively. Are you starting to see how this ties into Bowlby's statement that avoidantly attached people experience this compulsive self-reliance? So have a think about it. If someone with avoidant attachment style sees themselves positively and you negatively, and this is the template through which they see themselves and relationships through, could they ever truly love you? Would that even be possible? The answer is mostly no, but possibly yes. And I only say possibly yes because it's only possible if that avoidant is willing to heal. And let me tell you, most avoidants are not willing to heal. Why? Because in order to heal avoidant attachment style, they have to go back through anxious attachment style. And what happens then? when the avoidant goes to anxious is that they have to then learn how to manage this anxious response, which, as I've discussed before, is a 0 to 100 in 1 second type of response. What that means is when the anxious person experiences external stresses, their nervous system goes from 0 to 100 at breakneck speed. And once you've created this type of nervous system response in someone, it's very hard to correct it. It's possible, but very hard. A lot of people, as they become adults with anxious attachment style or anxious avoidant attachment style, is that the only hope they feel they have is to manage their anxiety, because that template has already been created when they were a vulnerable baby. So if the avoidant has this mechanism of compulsive self-reliance, what this means is that they can never truly be capable enough to feel any emotions. Because as soon as they start to get intimate with you, as soon as they start to be vulnerable, the anxiety goes through the roof. And then this inner template of compulsive self-reliance always tries to pull them back to avoidance. They literally just want to disconnect completely. And with a lot of avoidance, it's not just disconnection, it's despondency, it's disassociation. And that's when you know you have deep trauma to work with. I would argue that if you're securely attached and you have the wherewithal to work with your avoidant and to help them value vulnerability, then yes, then maybe there's a chance that your avoidant could eventually come to truly love you. But are you willing to be the parent for your avoidant? Because that's essentially what you're going to be doing. Remember, every single avoidant has come into this world with an emotional deficit. They've come into this world and they've grown into adulthood with an extreme deficit of resources. Securely attached people have been known to be people who have the inner resources to work through life stresses, even when they're novel, even when they're unexpected, because they have a positive view of themselves and others. And because their parents have modeled good problem solving and good emotional regulation. Their parents gave them those emotional resources inadvertently by being there for them emotionally. They were their rock. Those are good parents. They are literally the rock for their children. And because their parents modeled that and gave them that, these securely attached people grow into emotionally resourceful adults. Unfortunately, avoidantly attached people just don't have that. So essentially, if you want to be in a relationship with an avoidant, if you want your avoidant to love you, you have to assume the role of the parent. Are you willing to do that? That's the real question. And as I've said many times before on my many articles on dealing with avoidance, if you feel a calling to do that, that's your prerogative. I respect that. If that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do it. There are people out there who are capable of doing that. If you can absorb that cost on your emotions and on your sanity, you have the freedom to do that. And I would say that in many cases there is hope, but you have to love and work through so much density and so much trauma, and you have to do it with joy and exuberant energy. And a lot of people just aren't up for that. So to answer that question of can an avoidant ever truly love you? The answer is, I'd say if they're on the extreme of the avoidant end, I'd expect no. Do not ever expect an avoidant to truly love you. Expect them to do what their inner template has been trained to do. Their nervous system has literally been trained to disassociate whenever intimacy is required of them and whenever vulnerability is required of them. Expect the avoidant to do that, but you can inspire an avoidant to trust intimacy and vulnerability if you have the resources. Now, things look a little different if you're with an anxious avoidant, so someone who is a little further down, away from that super extreme end of avoidance where you get like sociopaths and psychopaths. Those people, again, have what is called anxious avoidant or disorganized attachment style. If your avoidant is more on that end of the spectrum, I would say yes, deep down inside, your anxious avoidant can truly love you. Of course, they may not be able to show that love as much as you would if you're securely attached, but it's definitely possible. There's this misconception out there that avoidants are just these scared people who can connect with you and can love you deeply, but they can't. Their nervous system is literally wired to do the opposite of being intimate. Remember, compulsive self-reliance, that's the blueprint that their nervous system operates on. If you have an avoidant that can be vulnerable with you, that you can get through to, that you can see their emotions, then what I'd say is you have someone that you can work with. But in my experience, truly avoidant people are way too far gone to ever truly be intimate with you and be vulnerable with you and to care about you enough to love you. And here's a key insight into true avoidance that I want you to remember. Just because an avoidant can feel for themselves doesn't mean they can feel for you. It's one thing to feel for yourself. For example, you may feel as an avoidant that something's unfair, or you may be angry that something's been taken from you. But to feel for someone else takes another level of emotional resources and care that most avoidants can just never even dream of. So I'm saying all this not to paint avoidance in a negative light, but just to see the reality of the situation. When we're born, the only people who can give us emotional resources or even psychological and mental resources through which to cope are our caretakers or our parents. They're the only people that we can rely on. But if our parents were for some reason unable or unwilling to give that to us, we inevitably go out into the world with this deficit of capability and resources. So for the avoidant to truly learn to care about someone else and to love someone else, they would have to care enough to give back those resources to themselves that they were never given by their parents. So here's the big question. Why do you want the love of an avoidant? That's the big question. That's the big question that is begging for an honest answer. Why? Why do you want the love of an avoidant? Is it because maybe you have anxious attachment? Because a lot of securely attached people would have given up long ago, unless they really feel a calling to heal this avoidant and to put in the work to care about this avoidant. So here's what I've done for you. I've taken it upon myself to create an attachment style quiz. In that quiz, you can figure out where you are on the spectrum. How close are you to secure and how close are you to anxious or avoidant? Where are you on that spectrum? It's super important to figure out your own core attachment patterns because your attachment style affects the way you show up in every single relationship. Not only that, it affects how every single relationship you have will turn out. So you can either go to reneeslinks.com to take that attachment quiz or go to theattachmentquiz.com. Discover your core attachment style and then maybe come back and let me know how you scored in the comments section. I think doing that quiz helps you become more self-aware and it will help you answer the question of why do my relationships turn out the way they do? And why would I want the love of an avoidant? Okay, I hope that helped you understand avoidance and avoidant attachment style on a deeper level. Because I think this is a framework that has not only become bastardized, but has become more confusing as it's become more popular. And that's why I believe that clarity is so important around avoidant attachment style. So I hope this video has been enjoyable and helpful for you, and I'll see you in the next one. Wait, before you go, imagine 3 magical words so powerful that it got my coaching client's boyfriend to propose to her within 7 days. Yup, it's all in this book. Click the link on the screen to learn more.